Second half of our evening. We have 3 more readers. At the end of this reading, we'll have a Q&A for any of the readers, and we'll have all of the books available for sale and signing. Our first reader is Jamie Poissant, who is a 2001 Berry graduate. His stories have appeared in the Chicago Tribune, Willow Springs, the Chattahoochee Review, and Orchid. In 2006, he was named winner of the George Garrett Fiction Award and a finalist for the Nelson Algren Award. His story, Venn Diagram, won second prize in the Atlantic Monthly Student Writing Contest and will appear in Best New American Voices 2008. He has attended the Sewanee Writers Conference as a George and Ann Borchardt Scholar and twice been nominated for the Pushcart Prize. He is currently an MFA candidate at the University of Arizona and co-editor of Sonora Review.
Thank you guys for coming. I'm going to read a story tonight called Between the Teeth. Jill's had James Dean the dog since college, a gift from her parents before they died, car crash, which makes him extra special to her, a last link to her ancestry, or something like that. For Jill's sake, Dean and I maintain a decent enough relationship, though there's been tension from the beginning, each of us sure that Jill belongs to him. The courtship was rocky, Jill waiting for Dean to warm to me. Our lovemaking was interrupted more than once by barking and a paw on my pillow. 5 years after our wedding, he still jumps in bed between us, growling when I turn in my sleep. More than once, I've had nightmares of waking unmanned. Tonight, after Dean's been led into the bedroom, he nuzzles Jill and glares at me in a way that says, "I know where you've been." Jill says, "Do you think we're meant to be?" "What do you mean?" I ask, thinking, "Oh God." Thinking, here we go again. "I mean," she says, "what if in the end your husband and your soulmate and the person you're supposed to be with, what if they all turn out to be different people?" "Are you seeing Richard again?" I ask. "No, honey, I told you that's over." "Are you sure?" "Sure, I'm sure," she says, rolling onto her side. She pulls the chain on her bedside lamp and pretends to fall asleep. I reach out, and Dean moves to shield her from my touch. He gives her elbow a lick, then looks me in the eye. He will not sleep until I do. "Jill," I say. Jill offers only a quiet grunt. Dean moves to cushion the small of her back. Clearly, she's still seeing Richard. In the morning, I roll over Dean in the driveway. Just crush him. An honest mistake, not cold-blooded murder, just bad driving. Backing up without checking the mirrors, the kind of thing that lands a neighbor's toddler in the ICU and you on the evening news. A simple case of wrong place, wrong time, that, and we had a deal. And Dean broke the deal. It's my responsibility to walk Dean in the mornings, my only, Jill's word, responsibility when it comes to her, my word, dog. Dean, an old beagle with a nose like a coke fiend, takes his time making his way around the block, stopping every few feet to sniff another dog's piss, to piss on another dog's piss, or to lick the place on his body where the piss comes out. Not a morning person, I never particularly wanted to get up early to walk Dean. The deal then was this. I get up and let Dean out. He has free reign of the neighborhood. In return, he comes home before I leave for work. Both parties found the arrangement amenable. I get to sleep in, Dean gets to take his time, pissing all over whatever he likes. For years we've operated like this, under the guise of what Jill doesn't know won't hurt her. Usually, Dean scratches at the door just as I'm buttering a bagel or pouring milk over a bowl of Raisin Bran. But this morning, Dean doesn't come back. Not after I finish breakfast and wash my plate. Not once I've made a second pot of coffee for Jill. Not even after I stand at the open door, briefcase in hand, and quietly call for him. I go to the garage, get in my Jeep. I've never had to look for Dean before. I think of Mr. Lancaster. Imagine the man chasing Dean out of his vegetable garden, pitchfork in hand. Or perhaps Dean's made it under Miss Mead's fence, at last having his way with the hot little Papillon that wags her ass at us whenever we walk by. I even envision Dean dead, the target of some gang initiation, whereby one must off a dog in order to get his first bandana. What I don't picture is Dean hit by a car. Not until the moment I feel the thud, hear the crunch, the unmistakable sound of beagle bones snapping under 50,000-mile Michelin tread. It's my first real experience with death. Even my grandparents are healthy as horses. I had a guinea pig once in middle school. Something was wrong with him, and his butt exploded. It wasn't a pretty sight, but that was a guinea pig, a rodent. People don't cry over dead rodents. This is nothing like that. Dean appears unhurt. Only a thin string of red runs from his open mouth. He pants. I place my hand on his side. He doesn't yelp, just closes his eyes. His rib cage feels like a bag of potato chips. This dog, I think, will never make it. This is a doomed dog. At this moment, I can do many things. I could tell Jill, or not. I could say Dean ran away, got out the door while I fiddled with his leash and collar. But then what to do with the body? A neighbor's trash can seems risky. There are woods nearby, but boys play there. I could drive out to the country, dig a little hole. Except there's more to consider than just disposal. I can't bury Dean while he's still breathing. I mean, I could, but I can't. I'm not that man. And how long does it take a dog to die? I consider methods of expediting the process. A plastic Kroger bag from under the kitchen sink, a shoelace to hold it in place, a can of Ajax mashed up in raw hamburger, shovel to the head. I can't hide the truth of Dean's death from Jill, but perhaps I can disguise it. Another car, I could say. This car came flying around the corner, ripped the leash right out of my hand. I never caught the license plate, too intent on tending to Dean, used the fireman's carry to bring the body home and everything. In the end, it's Jill who makes the decision for me. I look up and she's running down the driveway, her worn red bathrobe held together by a manicured hand. Even without makeup, with sleep caught under one eye, and dry drool flaking from the corner of her mouth, as Jill crouches beside me, takes James Dean's head into her hands. I think, you are beautiful. Jill won't talk to me. James Dean lies in her lap, legs at odd angles, head loose, jumping with every bump of the Jeep. At each jostle, Jill shoots a look my way that says, be careful, and as I slow down, bats eyes that plead, hurry up. It's no short trip. This is upstate New York, an hour north of Syracuse, a half hour north of civilization. The nearest animal hospital is 20 miles of old roads away. I reach for the radio, decide it's inappropriate, then change my mind and turn the dial. A fiery host argues with a listener. I was hoping for music. Before I change it, Jill stretches over Dean, turns the radio off, and we're back to the hum of the Jeep and Dean's panting, the metronome of his quick, shallow breaths. It's the moment where one of us is meant to speak, and I'm still wondering who goes first when Jill interrupts the silence. You didn't have to do it, she says. I would have stopped seeing Richard. But, I say, and my tongue catches on my teeth. So it is true. I knew this, sure, but it's different now, the admission making it more real. Outside, apples bob in the morning light. We thread an orchard, then up a hill, and suddenly we're facing clear sky. From a field, a man on a stick waves a hand of hay, a crow for a hat, and I remember what it was like to be a boy. Jill is crying. How could you do this, she says. Jill, I say, it was an accident. I wouldn't ever. I look at her. She looks back, searching my face for clues. Come on, I say. Don't you know me at all? It's so much to explain, but I tell Jill about the deals and the walks, how for years this is how we did it, that I messed up, that I wasn't leaving for work, that I went to find Dean and didn't look both ways before I backed over him. We continue down the road, the landscape mutating into a town. A drugstore here, post office there, and suddenly we're in Rosemont and the small animal hospital comes into view. It's an old house, green shutters, plank siding, and peeling white paint that's been converted into a business. Out front, a sign features a caricature of a cat with a thermometer in its mouth. I pull into the parking lot. I'm afraid of what comes next. I'm sorry, Jill says. I'm sorry too, I say. Do you think? Jill begins to cry again. I don't know, I say. Let's take him inside and see. How I caught Jill and Richard last year. I came home from the farm early, because that's the way it always happens. I'd had a bad lunch with a client, awful conversation over lukewarm linguine, and I'd been throwing up about once every hour since. There was no car in the driveway, no trail of clothes down the hall, no noise even to give me pause as I pushed against my bedroom door. What I found was not two people having sex, just two topless people sitting beside each other, reading from the same book. It was the most intimate moment I'd ever seen Jill in. Nobody knew what to do. Then I threw up all over the floor. Some days I wish I had opened the door to two people having sex. The vet's office is beige walls and wax plants. Track lighting, tinny music piped through cheap speakers concealed behind flower pots. I'm filling out forms when Jill returns from a back room. She sits beside me on the long, narrow bench that takes up one wall. She looks terrible, her face puffy and red, her hair like Medusa's. How is he, I ask. I don't know, she says. They won't tell me anything. They're doing x-rays. They asked me to leave. Jill raises a hand to her face and traces the outline of one eye with a single knuckle. She mumbles something I can't make out. What's that, I ask. I think I'm pregnant, she says. I'm sorry? Pregnant. But when, how long have you known? I don't know. Maybe a month. But we've hardly, I know. Hold on, I say. Do you mean to tell me? I don't know, she says. I'll have to do the math. Go to the doctor. I stand. I sit. I stand, walk once around the room and sit again. Honey, she says. And it's her turn to be level-headed. Calm down. Are you going to leave me? If it's Richard's, will you leave? Of course not, she says. She takes my hand and squeezes. I mean it. It's over now. So what do we do with it? Things can be done, she says. I consider this, and a shiver runs down my back. I try to picture it. I try not to. And what would we call this in our case? Extermination? I won't raise another man's child, and yet I don't think I could kill it either. What if I told you it wasn't an accident, I say, that I ran over James Dean on purpose? What? Jill says. If I meant to hit the dog, I say, would you still want me around? Jill's eyes are wide. She lets go of my hand. Did you? No. I want a song to soar through the room, suddenly meaningful and ironic. Your cheating heart, something like that, something to make Jill cry. Of course, this is not what happens. The same soft classical music comes out of the speakers, some concerto or other. The thing swells, peaks, then falls away in a shimmy of violins. The first time I met Dean, I was drunk. Jill's parents had just died. We'd been to the viewing, then gone straight to a bar a few blocks from Jill's place. We were bracing ourselves for the funeral the next afternoon. We were still in school at Syracuse, had only known each other a few weeks, but standing by the caskets, Jill introduced me to one relative as her boyfriend. Looking back, it is as if there was never a choice in the matter. Neither of us had the chance to turn the other down, as though in death something had been decided for us. Jill and I stumbled into her apartment and groped on the couch. I was supine, Jill on top of me taking off her shirt. I looked to my right, and there was this animal, brown and white, broad-shouldered and squatty. His tail stood up in the air like a middle finger. He was about 6 inches from my face. "Jill," I said. Jill pulled her shirt away from her face and looked down. "Oh," she said, "that's James Dean. Say hi, Dean." Dean growled. His teeth were white, but his gum line was black. He didn't bite, but he let me know he'd like to. "Dean," Jill said, "you be nice." Then to me, "Don't worry, he's really friendly once you get to know him." We made love like that, Jill on top of me, the beagle beside me. Dean did not take his eyes off me the whole time. The veterinarian, tall and thin, 40 or 50, is not a bad man, but he's the bearer of bad news, and I think we both hate him for it. He frowns, but his handlebar mustache curls upward in a smile. He's probably given this speech so many times that it no longer holds meaning for him. They're just words, what he was taught to recite before he got his diploma. "I'm sorry," he says in conclusion, "but there's nothing else we can do. It would be cruel to draw this out any longer. I think the best thing we can do for..." He pauses, glances at his clipboard, looks back at us and reassumes an expression of sorrow. "Dean, at this point, is to let him go. We can help him do that. It won't hurt. It will be like falling into a peaceful sleep." I look at Jill for confirmation, but she's gone, beyond words. "Would you like to say goodbye?" the man says. I turn to Jill. I look back at the man and nod. The euthanization room is dim, punctured by weird halogen lights that cast everything in an unsettling yellow-green glow. James Dean is on his side on a steel table. He's been muzzled, and an IV tube extends from one paw to a bag hanging from a hook on the wall. The steel table looks cold. I touch it, and it is. There's something alien about the scene, like he's not even our dog. I expect Jill to burst into tears, but she displays no emotion. "Here," I say. I unclip the muzzle and pull it away from Dean's snout. Suddenly, he looks more like the dog we both know. I pet his head, and he sniffs at my hand. He tries to shuffle forward, but his lower half doesn't follow his front leg's lead, and his nails scrape against the table. "Would you like to step outside?" I ask. "Yes," Jill says. She moves toward the door. "Wait," I say. "I'm really sorry, Jill. I'm sorry about this, all of it." She stands at the door, her hand on the knob. "Whatever you want to do," I say. "I'm your man. We're in this thing together." Maybe it's the classical music coming through the thin walls of the next room, or that our dog is dying on top of the table in front of us. Perhaps it's something else entirely. But before Jill walks out the door, she smiles. She gives me a look that says, "At least we have each other." That seems to say, we can still make this work. A look that says, "Don't worry, love won't let go." Now, it's just me and Dean. It's hard to look at him, so I look around the room. It's small, not like the offices where you take your pet for a checkup. No tins of doggy treats or posters of breeds on the walls. No plastic models of organs on the countertop. The room is reserved for death. There are 2 chairs, a big padded one for the doctor and a white plastic chair, an old piece of patio furniture. I pick the plastic chair, which seems to open its arms to accept me as I sit, then grips my hips so tightly I wonder if I'll escape. I force myself to look at Dean, and Dean looks back. He's got his head balanced on his front paws. If you took away the IV tube, he'd look like one of those dogs you see on calendars with titles like Beautiful Beagles or Purebred Hounds. "We had a deal," I say. Dean doesn't say anything, just watches me with his big, sad dog eyes. He winces, and I know that he must be in terrible pain, that it's time to get this over with. Then, on cue, the veterinarian walks in. He carries a small tray with a stiff blue cloth draped over the top, like I won't guess what's underneath. "If you're finished, Mr. Michaels," he says, "I'd like to go ahead with the procedure." The procedure. He says it as one might say spatula. There's no inflection, no hint of what is contained in the syringe and what it will do to the dog. "I'll need you to step out," he says. His face is kind, but his voice is firm. "No," I say. "I think I'll stay." We generally don't recommend that. I want to watch you kill my dog, I say. Sir, he says, but what else is there to say? If you want me to sign a waiver or something, I'll do it. The man frowns. He pulls away the blue cloth from the tray, revealing 2 shots. I'm afraid I'll need to put the muzzle back on, he says. He tried to bite one of my technicians. Sorry about that, I say. The vet steps forward with the muzzle, but something in me churns. It seems undignified, like Dean deserves better. I may not like this dog, but all living things deserve to die decently. I believe that. I jump up, the chair clinging to me for a second before clattering to the floor. Wait, I say, don't put that thing on him. I'll take care of it. The vet looks at me skeptically, then puts the muzzle away. I step up to the table and crouch so that Dean and I are eye and eye. Well, buddy, I say, this is it. I make a fist around his snout and nod at the vet. The first needle goes in, and Dean whines. He struggles under my grip. Quickly, the vet retrieves the second syringe. When the needle hits his hide, though, Dean thrashes, pulls his mouth from my hand, and bites down hard on my thumb. The vet injects the last of the toxin, pulls the needle out, and still, Dean doesn't let go. I try to pry my hand from his jaws, but he holds on tight. And he dies like that, my bloody thumb caught between his teeth. And for the first time since we met, he looks happy.
A native of San Francisco and a longtime resident of Spain, Francisco Arajon, our next reader, is the author of Puerto del Sol and 3 limited edition chapbooks. His anthology publications include Inventions of Farewell, a Book of Elegies, Under the Fifth Sun, Latino Literature from California, American Diaspora, Poetry of Displacement, and Deep Travel, Contemporary American Poets Abroad, just released from Rome's own 9 Press. His poems and translations have appeared in Chain, Crab Orchard Review, Electronic Poetry Review, Puerto del Sol, and Zizifa, among others. The editor of The Wind Shifts, new Latino poetry, just out from the University of Arizona Press, which we have on sale tonight, along with Deep Travel and Puerto del Sol. He is the director of Letras Latinas, literary unit of the Institute for Latino Studies at the University of Notre Dame, and the founding editor of Momotombo Press.
Thank you very much. That was a great story. I love it. I'm going to read to you a few poems from my book, a couple of things from the anthology, and then finish up from the book again. I lived in Spain for the better part of the 90s, mostly Madrid. And the poems in the book, in large part, are about public spaces. And I want to open with a poem called Café Central, which is a poem that was inspired by experiencing a particularly wonderful performance by a jazz trio in Madrid, headed by a Catalan pianist named Tete Montoliu, who was blind from birth, had classical musical training, but as an adolescent came into contact with an African-American jazz musician and changed direction and never looked back. And he gave a wonderful performance with a Danish bass player and an African-American drummer that inspired me to write this poem called Café Central, which is the name of the club in Madrid where he performed. The book, Puerto del Sol, is in English and Spanish. The poems were all written in English, but I elaborated a Spanish version for every poem. So to give you a flavor of that, I'm going to read to you, for this particular poem, I'll read the version in English, and I'll let you hear what the version in Spanish sounds like. Café Central. Of the three, the one on his feet, a Dane, slightly hunched, his arms loosely hugging from behind the hip-shaped instrument of wood, his fingers punishing the strings, picking up speed as he grunts, just audibly, the notes of his solo within the piece, his forehead near the rafters, glistening, till he gives the one from Catalonia at the keys, who can't see a thing in or out of those shades, a look as if to say, almost pleading, reel me in. So when finger and thumb strike, lighting the fuse, both player and bass are pulled back down between piano and drums, the three in the end hovering safely near the ground again. De los tres, el que está de pie, un danés, ligeramente inclinado, abrazando suavemente por detrás las caderas de su instrumento de madera, sus dedos castigando las cuerdas, acelerándose mientras gruñe de forma apenas audible las notas de su solo dentro de la pieza, su frente reluciente cerca del techo, hasta que dirige una mirada al catalán que está ante el teclado, que no ve nada con o sin esas gafas de sol, como si le dijera suplicando, recupérame. Así que al tronar dedo y pulgar, encendiendo la mecha, músico y contrabajo descienden entre piano y batería, cerniéndose al final los tres, a salvo sobre el suelo otra vez. One of the things about living in Spain in the mid-90s, in the 90s, pre 9/11, as an American citizen living in Spain, it was my first experience of living in a country where terrorism was a real possibility. And the backdrop for this next poem, which is one of the poems that Sandy chose for Deep Travel, has as its backdrop a terrorist bombing. And I'll just say that the you in the poem is a former high school teacher who was visiting Madrid in the 90s with his mother and daughter and wife, and they were visiting his nephew who was studying there. And I also say that another backdrop for the poem is the first Gulf War in the early 90s. And one last thing, what I did mostly when I lived in Spain was I taught English as a foreign language, and a lot of what I did involved teaching people English in their places of work, in this particular case, a bank. February snow. The tint of the sky between sunset and night, and wandering with you and your nephew in that maze, half lost, Madrid of the Austrias, looking for Plaza of the Green Cross, where, days before you arrived, an Opel with false plates was parked, its wheels straddling the curb. And so the van heading for the barracks that morning had to slow to squeeze past. Back at the hotel, your mom is holding up her gift, amethyst, she says, admiring how light, when passing through a prism, bends. At his window that morning before we began, my student said, "Qué bonito," watching it drift and descend, settling on roofs and cars. And I think of you and your wife and daughter, getting to see Madrid in white, your visit winding down, and how I had wanted that lesson to end, to get to the park. Retiro, they say, is the city's one lung, and the way the feel and sound of steps cease when grass is completely covered, as if walking on a cloud. The year before, on a visit from the coast, a friend sitting at a window watched the flakes flutter and fall, dissolving before reaching the ground. Agua nieve, he said, while from a town near Seville, B-52s were lifting off. I was in a trance that week, though like most things the war in the Gulf was soon another backdrop, like the string of car bombs the following year. And yet that morning, as soon as I heard, something led me not to the park, but down to City Hall, workers in the street, evacuated, sipping coffee, though I never reached the site. Of course it was cordoned off, the spray of glass, the heap of twisted metal, and so later learned their names, their lives. Of the 5, there was one, a postal clerk, who, as a boy, would plunge his hands into the white, the cold, the sweet jolt whenever he got to touch the stuff, scooping it tightly into a ball, like the ones he would dodge and throw years later at his wife-to-be. Those weekends, those places, away from city air, a release. Miraflores, Siete Picos, Rasca Fria. It's in his blood, she would come to say, chatting with a neighbor about his thing for snow, the way it falls softly, blanketing roofs and groves, villages nestled in the Sierra's hills. It is February, and she is picturing him and the boy up there now, playing, horsing around. Okay, I'm going to shift gears for a moment. Sandy mentioned this anthology, just out, and I'm going to read you a poem from it. I was born and raised in San Francisco, and I think a number of people, I think all of us who write, perhaps remember seminal moments in our youth when we feel drawn to the written word. And one such moment for me, I was a sophomore in high school, and I had heard, this would have been in the early 80s, I had heard that the Nicaraguan poet Ernesto Cardenal, who at the time was the Minister of Culture of the Nicaraguan government, was going to be giving a reading at UC Berkeley across the bay. And so I found out what day the reading was going to be, and I skipped school and took the subway across the bay to hear him read. And so this is sort of the backdrop of this poem. It's titled Ernesto Cardenal in Berkeley. I make reference to the subway system in San Francisco. It's called BART. Though I don't name it here, but I'll name it in another poem. Ernesto Cardenal in Berkeley. The books in my backpack felt lighter walking down the stairs at 24th and Mission. The sky was clear and I wasn't heading for school. Above, at the station's mouth, a preacher wove Spanish while beyond him on the ground a whiskered man snored through the morning, his trousers soiled. A thought flickered, swayed Ruben Darío in Madrid as I rode east along the floor of the bay. Commuters dozed, later did crosswords going home, more of them boarding at Embarcadero, Montgomery, Pal. After the reading, I was a notebook being filled, Mama y Papa juntos, a different life billowing inside me. A dusty street in Granada or León, playing baseball. Or picturing in class how Francisco Hernandez de Córdoba is led across the plaza he himself had traced out with his sword, beheaded. I should have made a mention. Francisco Hernandez de Córdoba is the Spanish explorer who discovered Nicaragua, and currency is named after him, and he was actually executed. This next poem is a poem that takes lines from another poet's work to create a new piece, and I call this Portrait with lines of Montali. Montali, a reference to the Italian poet Eugenio Montali. And this poem is dedicated to my father. Portrait with lines of Montali. A patch of town-sick country. The old shop window shuttered and harmless. An odor of bruised melons oozes from the floor, among wicker furniture and a mattress. Mildew like grass sprouts as well, the delicate capillaries of slime, signs of quite another orbit, the ungraspable gorge, sentiments and sediment, where my carved name quivers. His laugh is jagged coughing. And I'll finish from this book, the anthology, with one of the projects that I'm currently working on are translations and very liberal versions from the Spanish of Rubén Darío, who was a poet who was born and died in Nicaragua but spent most of his adult life abroad, including long stretches of time in Europe. And this is just a version of one of his poems called Far Away. Ox I saw as a child, breath, little clouds of steam, vivid in the sun. Nicaragua, a fertile ranch, abundant, rhythms, tropic, dove in a forest of sound, wind, bird, bull, axe. The core of me are these, and these I praise. Yes, ox, lumbering, you evoke tender dawn, the milking hour, when days were white and rose, and you, cooing mountain dove, recall April, May, when spring was everything. And I'm going to close with another poem from the book. I hadn't planned on reading this particular poem today. The middle section of the book is in essence an elegy to my mother, who passed away about 10 years ago from cancer. And there's a poem in the middle of the book in that section, which I have rarely read in public. I think it's a bit of a challenging poem because the poem is taking place in different time frames. And the poem is taking place roughly a year after my mother has passed away. And it's taking place in Spain, but also thinking back on various stages of my life in Spain. I had spent a year in Barcelona before I settled down into Madrid. I was a student in Barcelona first as a student before I lived in Madrid to teach English. But I'm going to read it. Sandy and I had lunch today, and we were discussing our respective situations with Sandy's mom being ill, and I thought about that today, and so I'm going to read this poem. It's called Winter Sun. And again, there's references to my teaching and spending a lot of time on public transport as a teacher of English in Madrid. Winter Sun. That my student the banker phoned to cancel his 3 o'clock is what triggered it, sparing me the subway car, half my days spent underground as teaching on site demands. Allowing instead a walk in the winter sun, this unhurried errand, picking up a new pair of glasses, producing in me a mood I'm trying to name, the air after last night's storm, crisp enough to taste, sprinkled with sputtering Vespas and horns, the newly scrubbed neoclassic facades along Alcalá. And faces glanced or gazed at, waiting for the light to change, as it did 10 years ago when I was first a student in Spain. The last class of the week finished, and so I'd stroll to the port. Not sidewalks along the street, but one wide walk, traffic streaming up and down, both sides of it, La Rambla, past merchant pavilions on my right and left, newsagents, florists, pet sellers and their chirping cages, the year I lived on the Mediterranean, meeting my second week there, Sandra and Bob. We sold our cottage in Bournemouth so we could navigate, live docked in a port city a stretch, and sail to the next, she said, lathering up a little dog. Sandra and Bob, those walks to the harbor, sipping tea into the early evening on their boat, home away from home until they headed back to England that spring. The adventure altered, failed. The shadow of their absence for weeks after they left, difficult to name, as it's hard to name this, the opposite. Something perhaps approaching exhilaration, subdued joy, those Fridays in college I didn't cross the bay to the city and would meet her who'd taken Bart for me at Mario's on Telegraph and Haste. Tamales, beans, and rice on a huge plate. It's been a year and a day. A year and a day since I was sailing west across the states, the 767 hugging the earth, and she below, her breathing labored, slowly drifting away. Thank you very much.
Before I introduce our last readers, I want to thank everybody again for coming out and indulging yourselves in some live literature. And I hope to see you at these events again. Our last reader is Andrew Monson, who lives in Michigan, where he edits the magazine Diagram online, thediagram.com, and the New Michigan Press. He is the author of 3 books, Other Electricities, Vacation Land, and Neck Deep in Other Predicaments, all on sale right there. He's also a fellow Alabama grad, and I'm very proud. And I'm very glad that he's here, so please welcome him.
Well, thank you all for having me and for staying to the end of the marathon. It's actually a pleasure and sort of a difficulty of having to follow this much good writing. So I'll do what I can. I'm going to read one poem, and then I will read. I'm going to read an essay here, which I'll talk about in a minute. This is my poem. And we've had a couple elegies, and then I write a lot of elegies because I like elegies. And this is called. This is a poem. It's in the voice of this character, the clown baby. I went to a friend of mine gave a reading, and he said these poems in the voice of the clown baby. And you know, the clown baby is self-explanatory. It's a baby clown. And his poems I thought were pretty horrible. At least the ones about this clown. And so this was why I'm not telling you his name. And so I thought I would write a poem equally horrible in the voice of the clown baby. And it's called Elegy for Biatch. And it has an epigraph from this writer who I found on the internet who has a story in the voice of the clown baby. Her name is Jennifer Garrison Stuber. Her story was a lot better than my friend's poems. But the epigraph is, my real parents, the clowns, wanted their clown baby back. I demanded proof. It is not enough to tell you they were sad, or you were sad, or we were sad enough for all the wrecked egg of a world, for the sight of wilted elephants standing in a circle, and the always groaning armless man who keens Mariah Carey songs underneath his knapsack that looks sort of like another head. I don't regret the sight of myself in sunlight, painted splotches that mean emotion on my face to you. Spotlit, I am something special. All glow and happenstance and superpowered hunger, also action. There is this glory in emaciation. I am your new favorite bird, the one you leave when it gets dark and the world has cooled to the temperature of soot, the one you leave suet out for in the cold after everything with longer wings has set out for the south. And if the squirrels cannot scale the pole for food because of your baffling contraption, and if they whirl and trail frustrated figure eights in the snow that will last only another couple hours before sublimation, I am undeterred by your revulsion, your recreation, those awful shellac popcorn decorations you spike your Christmas tree with every year. I've seen those too, through glass and snow, and years of training to see through clouds, locked doors, and drywall with my mind. Scarves tied around my eyes, my heart as crystalline as dolomite. As such, I have zero interest in your pity, in your prettiness and dripping eaves, the outside of your frosted glass that keeps you from my heaving breast at night, that keeps my breath from curling in underneath the weather stripping and becoming corporeal while you sleep. You think you're something separate from the world, a gleaming satellite affixed above all our dreams. But you're the undeveloped photographs that persist past memory in all of our disposable cameras. What you don't know is this. All the world is filtered light and trash beneath the bleachers. All the world is tilt and crash and power loss, though let's come out this time and call it love and circumstance. Or all the world is interruption, terror face and gaslight, just before it bursts. Okay. So this is I'm going to read an essay from my new book, and I've never read this before, so you'll have to indulge me. This is 3/4 of an essay, which is a polemic piece, sort of proselytizing for disc golf, which is my personal favorite thing to do. And I'm a semi-pro. I'm a member of the Professional Disc Golf Association. And I'm reading this because I noticed that you guys have a disc golf course on this campus, which is very exciting for me. There are very few places have this. And so this is my essay about this. It's called The Long Crush. First, people, please. It's disc golf, not frisbee golf. If you've heard of the sport at all, which is unlikely unless, one, you watch a lot of ESPN2 late at night between Magic the Gathering tournaments, the National Paintball Finals, and celebrity poker tours. Or two, you smoke a lot of pot. Or three, you play ultimate frisbee, which often has a correlation with number 2 and number 4. Or number 4, you go to college somewhere other than the East Coast. Frisbee is a brand of recreational flying disc made by Whammo, usually 135 grams, which is light as opposed to 165-gram ultimate frisbee disc. Whereas disc golf is played with heavier golf discs, though Whammo does make a few golf discs, among them the 86 Softie, a classic putter recently brought back into circulation, but their models aren't particularly good or popular anymore. One version of disc golf is called Frolf, featured on an episode of Seinfeld, but that's different, as it is played not on dedicated courses, but in parks and in cities with regular frisbees. A frisbee can leave a bruise. A golf disc could probably, though I didn't take enough physics in school to prove it, kill you. I have spent thousands of hours playing this game on over 100 courses from San Diego to Tuscaloosa to Canton, where the Pro Football Hall of Fame resides just outside of Cleveland. Mostly this is in summertime, which is the height of my obsession with the glorious game, between the work of refinishing the floors of my 100-year-old house and the occasional teaching and catching up on reading during the long breath between semesters. The real test of the devotee, though, is when the summer gives way to cold and fall and leaves start descending, sparkling to the ground. My rule is that I will play year-round if it is above 0, and occasionally I play when it's below. Snow is no real obstacle, though it requires heavy boots and bundling up. Sometimes parks close, and disc golf, as you may know, is primarily played in public parks on actual designed courses with real chain link baskets. The ones on this campus, I believe, are Mach 5s, but into which wander kids and dogs, punks and drunks, and then you have to circumvent the gates to get in. I played with guys who tie streamers to the backs of their discs to aid in locating them when they get buried in the banks beneath the latest snowfall. I have been known to play in rain and massive windstorms. This is less than fun, but good for later narrative. In sleet and hail and drunkenness, in squalls and in tornado weather outside Ames, Iowa, where the sky turns green. When there are sirens and everything is suddenly and suspiciously still, I figure I can get one more hole in before calling it a day and running to a shelter. My thinking is this: if a disc were thrown in a tornado, it could potentially travel for miles and maybe forever. The flight could far surpass the flat land distance record for a golf disc, currently, at the time of this writing, about 250 meters, set by Swedish golfer Christian Sandström. This is an impressive record, as the average player can only throw about 100 meters. And the distance is one thing I do very well, which contributes to my obsession with the game, which is to say I can crush it. I can throw it 150 plus meters on a good day. I'm 3/8 Swedish, which may or may not help. I spend a lot of time trying to convince people that it is / I am not ridiculous, or that it's no more ridiculous than any other game or sport. So how can I convince you? It's not as if the game is any more bizarre than, quote, ball golf, as disc people call it. Throwing a disc is a far more natural emotion than hitting a tiny, dimpled, technologically enhanced Serlin or Balata-covered ball with a graphite-shafted Big Bertha stick. I mean, discs are in the frickin' Olympics. Well, discus anyhow. That means it's like old and Greek, like democracy and pederasty. Unlike ball golf, which hails from Scotland, the land of haggis and the band Delamitri. It takes much less time. I get in 18 holes in an hour and if I'm playing by myself, or maybe an hour and a half if I'm having more fun with friends. Compared to the 4+ hours of your life you'll blow on the ball golf course. It's a lot better for the environment. The Royal Ball Golf Course in the country of Dubai uses 1/3 of the country's yearly water supply for upkeep. That's true. That's true. This is non-fiction. And that's an extreme example. Compare that to a public park, which is unwatered, ungroomed, no carts or fertilizer required. It's a lot cheaper to play, free most places. Those occasionally have to pay $5 to get in the park. And the equipment, in spite of being doubly as cool as ball golf. More on this in a bit. Naturally, I'm going to skip the part where I discuss the many different kinds of discs, because that's probably a little tedious. But you can read the book if you're interested. The equipment's a lot cheaper. One disc, $6 to $8. if you would buy in the cheap plastic, is all you need to play. You could even play with a regular Frisbee, though I do not recommend that unless you mean to look like a chump. Compare again to perimeter-weighted, titanium-headed, graphite-shafted asshole sticks and the gas or electric carts that golfers, especially most Southerners that I've played with, use. Sorry. And in spite of this, I really like ball golf. I love to watch it on TV. I love its bizarreness and history. I have a set of clubs. I upgrade them annually. Always we require our new technologies, our upgrades, our big and bigger toys. I yearn and dream for Ping, for Callaway, for the budget and the skill set of the pros. I play at least a couple times a year with friends or my father-in-law. I like it on TV. I love playing Tiger Woods golf on Xbox with my friend Neil, the crime writer. Though disc is really a lot better. Disc golf lets me indulge in my most geekish tendencies, hoarding, or if you prefer, exhaustively collecting, as collectors prefer. A sometimes ferocious competitive streak, a serious interest in the bizarre or esoteric, a liking for diversions of all sorts, and a desire for control over the world. I have 200 discs, give or take a couple, and the water and trees, the concrete and backs of pickup trucks driving by, they give and take all the time. I usually only have about a third of those 200 discs in circulation. I carry 18 in my bag at any given time, and yes, I do have an official disc golf bag after years of carrying around modified purses gleaned from runs to the Salvation Army. These purses have also exposed me to mockery. I have duplicates, and I actually only brought 6 discs down with me because I had to fly, so I'm carrying those around in a paper bag. I probably look like some kind of wino. I have duplicates in case of loss during friendly play or tournaments. Some have been retired after hitting trees, and they become less reliable. If you've played, you know this. Their flight characteristics changing after each obstacle that you hit. And I've kept several discs that have split in half due to hitting trees during sub-zero play. My policy is to keep the broken ones that have some sentimental value, such as those I've used to hit holes in one, which are called aces, which you probably know. And in case you're interested, the official PDGA rule is that if a disc breaks in flight, you must play your next shot from the location of the largest remaining piece. Some of my discs are for show only, like my limited edition Starfire, my old Super Rock, and my 2004 and 2005 Championship Rocks, which are the most valuable discs you can buy, sold in limited editions each year, fetching upwards of $100 on eBay, repository of all we secretly need and hoard, but fear to own up to in public. When my wife cajoles me to make room for groceries in the trunk, I resist it. I can leave the jumper cables, the spare tire, or the jack at home. How often do you need those anyway? I've got AAA. Clearly, it is necessary for me to be able to outfit up to 10 friends who could conceivably join me for any given round with 6 discs each. This is courtesy. It is important to open up my trunk among non-disc golf friends and see their baffled stares at my neat sets of bins of discs organized by flight pattern, color, and type of plastic. At least I don't collect dolls or human remains, or hair samples from friends long gone, or something really strange. I kind of like the attention, though it often comes in the form of ridicule, and I won't change my life to avoid it. Maybe we can chalk this up to a combination of exhibitionism with obsessive compulsiveness and a touch of schadenfreude. Or maybe it is a serious lack of impulse control, something that has long been a problem of mine. And there's an essay in this book that discusses my many run-ins with the law, which I won't tell you more about. You have to read that. But trust me, I mean, it's federal task force kind of thing. There is something exuberant about the feeling of new plastic, especially the Champion line plastic. And Innova, which makes one line of discs, calls it Champion, and Discraft, which makes another line of discs, calls it Z plastic. It's like sometimes a little bit translucent, fluorescent, candy-colored, and just a little bit tacky. It feels space-age, made for the air, made to be accelerated by my arm out into a fairway as it stretches down a hill into the open. And materials advance every year, and you have to buy the newest thing, the new super stable Star plastic, which is better in cold weather. And they have cooler names each year, too. As such, I covet, am a massive sucker for it, and if I go into a disc store, I'm guaranteed to come up with at least one new item for the arsenal. I suppose this is how car buffs feel about some sweet new ride they are about to pimp. I say that as if I really know what that means. Or gun freaks fondling their new ceramic Glocks. This is the lure of technology, of having the newest, coolest, most advanced whatever, because each new thing opens up a hole in the world that you can step through and become a new and better you. Not all disc golfers are seduced as often as I am, but such is the province and the genius of the nerd. It is human nature. I am resigned. I never have a hard time understanding people's geekdoms, whether it's playing the first Bard's Tale game on their retrofitted 1985 PC with 16-color EGA graphics, trying to decipher the copy protection code wheels that came with games like this, or memorizing thousands of columns of baseball statistics, or writing fan fiction with Mulder and Scully finally getting on in a drunken and implausible threesome with Krychek, or digging through trash in hopes of finding illegal treasure for the eBay altar. My neighbor goes through condemned houses to salvage chunks of old crown molding and molding woodwork. I have some sympathy for that. I have accompanied him through the blocks of houses condemned and recently vacated by transients and immigrants just south of I-196 in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which the contractors claim will soon become a medical complex, or more likely a strip mall. I've gone through Michigan Bell trash cans in hopes of finding abandoned telephone system manuals and equipment. I know the men and women who obsess about the University of Alabama Crimson Tide football games, that long and hot tradition, who show up by the hundreds of thousands for home games against Auburn, LSU, or Tennessee. I had season tickets as a student, even during the dark NCAA probation years. These obsessions are good in their own way. I can get behind them. I can see that there are pleasures in almost anything if taken seriously enough. So then why? Why really? Well, there's some real aesthetic pleasure in playing around with my few remaining good friends from college in the morning, before most people are up, and after those who are unfortunate enough to be up, and not to be us, are at work. I love the sight of the disc in the air, its predictable motion as it flattens and turns and curves back. The term for this proper flight is called a helix, or an S-curve, because of its shape, and there's the S. And it curves around a stand of trees toward the Mach 5 basket made from chain link steel. The combination of that flight and whistling sound as it rushes by your head is beautiful. It is power, and the power is addictive. And this is the first sport, game, or recreational event that I've ever been really good at, so there's that too. The pleasure not of mastery, perhaps, but at least of an easy kind of competence. And there is the appreciation of course design, of a really well-designed hole, like Grand Rapids, Michigan's Riverside Park number 15, 250 feet out to a basket at the end of a peninsula in the middle of the lake, with the lake all around it, the green slick with goose shit, and because the geese apparently love this hole, and I don't understand why. Or hole 21 out of 27 on Cedar Lake, Indiana's course, a hole that stretches 410 feet around the edge of a lake, protected by trees on the left, and tempting you to go long over water for the green, for the birdie, or else to lay it up. Play it safe for par, like the chump you are. The chumps we all probably eventually are. Risk and reward. And the sound, not anticlimactic plunk of the ball as it drops quietly out of sight in the hole, but the satisfying crash, the ring, the ching, which is the sound it makes, of disc on chain. Aesthetics, appreciation, and other things that start with A. Yes, but there also is fellowship. The game is best played with friends, and it lends itself more to talk than ball golf does, and the people seem to be nicer on the disc golf course. And there's nature and a controlled isolation, the pleasure of the good walk spoiled, to hit up Twain. What I imagine hunters enjoy by being out in the woods, but without shooting the crap out of everything, or freezing silently in a tree stand. And there's the pleasure of obsession itself, immersion in the world of esoteric detail, in spite of, or maybe because of, the derision of the potsers, who just don't understand what it is to lose yourself so completely in something, and who cares finally what it is. So, in the end, I'm left with this. The view from the long hole 18, the pro tee. The serious should always play the longest, hardest tees. On Wisconsin's Elder Park course, on which my friend Leonard memorably played over 150 holes of golf in one cool hand Luke kind of day, when he was out against the world on a day off from being the best worker at the worst job at Taco Bell in the East Town Mall the summer that we lived in Madison. This hole stretches out 500 feet, with a 300-foot vertical drop down a huge hill toward the fields. It's a hole that you can reach with one good strong throw, with a chance of hitting an ace, of crushing the plastic directly into the chains with a gallery of potheads, kids, and other malcontents watching at first listlessly, and then with enthusiasm, "Dude, check it out!" as the shot takes on its shape, starts to live up to its design. The proper mix of muscle and trajectory, spin and snap and luck, and angle of release, and slopes finally toward the basket. You can feel blood and adrenaline. You can feel your hopes rising as you listen for the sound of disc on chain and then the echoing cheer. Now that is something to remember and a reason to keep playing whatever it is you play. Thank y'all.
So we'll have a brief Q&A with the authors, the range of authors. Do you all want to just come up here and just sort of stand around, or do you want to make people guess which one is which?
You're MC.
Why don't you come up here so that people can...
All right.
Can you identify the murderer?
To the left, please.
Fire away. Question? No?
They're looking bored up there. Y'all better ask.
We can hold out a little. We're teachers. We know about this.
Or you could just feel free to walk up and buy a book. It's a good sign.
Thank you.
Back.
Absolutely.